of the big announcements we made a couple weeks ago on our church service, right at the end of our legacy planning series, was an announcement that Dan Burrell, Dr. Dan Burrell, is
I prefer Your Holiness. We're going to use weird titles.
Is the Dr. Reverend Daniel Burrell, is going to be taking a new position at our church, and it was met with I think a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement. I didn't get a chance to go into it a lot of detail, but this was a significant step for our church and for you.
Yeah, I hope what it really does is I hope it sends a signal to the families of Life Fellowship that we take generational transference of faith seriously.
Absolutely.
I hope they see it as a sign that the elders of the church believe that this needs to be a priority during this generation.
Yeah. So I want to take this episode to ask you some questions, because I think people want to know, why this, why now? And I think, I'll be able to share a little bit more background on how this even came about, because this was not just hey, we had this idea and 2 months later it happened. I mean, This has been kind of, percolating for about a year now. And I think this
6 to 8 months,
idea has been developing in our hearts and minds. God really shaped it about, I would say, really concretely about 6 months ago. And then it just has happened so that you're taking this position. So I'd love to hear just from you. We'll start with where you're at now. We'll kind of work backwards. Why are you excited about this position of next generation family discipleship?
Well, for me, it's the culmination of a journey. I mean, first of all, I want to say I'm appreciative of the opportunity. At 61 years of age, I can see the finish line, and that's something that's a little hard for me personally to deal with, because the guy I see in the mirror and the guy that I talk to in my head are two different people. I don't feel any less energized about ministry. I don't feel any less energy personally than I ever have. And then I look at the mirror and say, well, what's Grandpa doing there? But to say all that, I have to deal with the reality that at 61, the finish line is within view. I don't want to be the guy that everybody's like, how long is this guy going to hang on? But I also want to finish well. I want to finish meaningfully. And that's important to me.
Yeah.
So, for some time, I've been wanting to kind of change the focus of my ministry away from process and back toward people.
Yeah.
Which was, where most people start their ministry. I like details. I like process. I like planning and organization and administration. And I can do that, without it being a huge energy drain on me. But at the same time, in 100 years, nobody's going to say, man, that was an amazing calendar you put together, or wow, that budget was just awesome.
Yeah.
Now, those are tools that are necessary, but in 100 years, the only thing that matters now that exists today are the souls of men and women in the Word of God.
That's right.
So I wanted to spend the last phase of my ministry, whether that's 5 years or 15 years, involved more with the souls of men and women. And then, on the other side, you have to recognize that God has all of us on a journey, and He gives us experiences and expertise in areas for a purpose. Whether I like it or not, over the course of my lifetime, I've had a lot of opportunities to work with children, and I work with teenagers, and to work with young parents. And, my proficiency in my academic area is in those areas with 3 degrees in education. On top of that, for Liberty University now as a professor there, associate professor for 17 years. My title is family discipleship subject matter expert. So it has been my job literally to research, what works in families and so forth. And I will tell you, in my own journey, when I was in my 30s and my kids were real little, I used to travel the country doing marriage and family seminars. I had one that literally, I probably sold 10,000 copies of it. It was Raising Beaver Cleaver Kids in a Bart Simpson World. And then later that aged out, and it was Raising Beaver Cleaver Kids in a Beavis and Butthead World. And I
just keep changing.
Yes, I was going to say, what would I use now?
Now you say Raising Bart Simpson Kids in a...
Absolutely.
And I don't even know the level of dysfunction that exists today.
Oh,
but
yeah, it's amazing. It's
there are
stunning.
things. I mean, it's crazy when you think that now Bart Simpson is kind of looked at as a kid's. Well, he's actually one of the brighter bulbs in
no kidding.
in the bin.
Yeah. And then in my own journey last year, you took me with you to a trip to Austin, Texas, where we were talking about gospel saturation. Unexpectedly to both of us, that conversation started emerging around the fact that we're almost doing a better job of reaching the culture around us than we are the culture that exists within the church in terms of families.
Yeah, that's like saying we were getting a D and there's an F. You know?
Yeah. Boy, that's the truth. So, and I was invited into this, this informal symposium conversation with some of the leading experts on family discipleship from around the country in Nashville last July or August, and spent time meeting with them. Some of the people that were literally in that room have resigned their positions to focus on this.
Yeah.
When 85% of the kids growing up in our evangelical churches are walking away from the faith permanently, that's a problem. And so we're brainstorming, and make a long story longer, as I was reporting this to the elders, as we were talking about the dilemma, as the Lord had laid upon you and the elders' hearts to consider family renewal as one of the priorities of this gospel saturation, then the conversation kind of shifted, and the Lord led in some of the elders' lives to ask me if this is an initiative I'd be interested in raising. And I think it's important in transparency to realize this. That 85% rule is true in my own home.
Yeah.
The reality is that I had all the answers when I was in 30s and discovered that all those answers were not correct answers. I had answers, but they weren't the right ones. And it's far more complicated than we have purported it to be. And in addition, the culture has changed so dramatically that we need to just kind of stop and rebuild from the ground up. And so over the next however many years that here's the reality for me. I will not know, I don't believe, whether or not the initiatives that I hope to see implemented and be a part of are going to be successful, because I probably won't live that long, because we're talking about a 15 to 30 year trajectory.
That's right.
So 30 years, I'll be 92. You know me well enough. I ain't going to be around.
Come on, Dan.
Yeah.
I mean,
so, by faith, we got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. I want us to go back. I wanted people to hear your heart, because I think one of the things that, I know you is this is a passion of yours, not just because of your experience and your history and your knowledge and your insight, but I think God has orchestrated all these things together for this moment. I want to take us back to last summer when you and I took a trip to Austin, Texas. We spent some time with the church that, by every metric in that you measure church, they are doing well. They're a mega church, and they have planted over 40 churches, and they are they're doing a really good job of reaching the people around the city, training their people, and there's a lot of things we learned from them. But one of the things that they were saying, and a much more mature expression of the kind of church we want to become, they were looking down the road 30 years and saying, man, we missed the family piece. Like, the family piece was something that they are just now really leaning into, because they're saying is the 85%. We did a really good job of planting 40 churches in our city and reaching, thousands of people that are now followers of Jesus. But the next generation coming up within not only their church, but all these churches are like, they're just not following Jesus.
Right. And
so there's something about the discipleship of the next generation that we are swinging and missing on. We've had episodes on this, right, on youth ministry, and it is the great. We know that discipleship for the next generation is not necessarily an equation. But there are principles that we got to get back to. But it was that trip that you and I really came back with, and we said, man, this is. What's beautiful about meeting with a church like that is you can learn from their, I wouldn't say mistakes, but you can learn from the things that they're saying. They're waking up 30 years down the road saying, man, we wish we'd have done this 30 years ago, but we're just now working on this. And they're pouring a lot of their energy into that. it's great that for us, as we are just now beginning to lean into some of these changes we're trying to make as a church, to say, hey, we get to do all of these at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we hit the drawing board, saying we feel a great need for this idea of, and we were just going through the series on Babylon, right? Thriving in Babylon, and so we're all of us are aware of the Babylonian culture that feels like it's rising, it's gaining more influence on our young people. We're feeling it, we're sensing it. So there's something spiritual going on. We're learning about this. And for us, we just felt this incredible burden to say, well, what are we going to do as a church? Are we just going to be like, well, we hope you parents figure it out? Or are we just going to we could have sermon series and we can have podcast episodes all day long telling people they need to do a better job, but you got to do something about it. Yep. You know what I mean? And I think that's what a lot of this came out of as well.
Yeah, and I think the church has to be in a position where we're resourcing our parents as best as we can, because parents are going to need resources, and they will find resources.
Yes.
And in the absence of good biblical and scripturally based resources, they'll go somewhere else where it isn't biblically based.
Yes.
It is pop psychology, and it is, the woke idealism of cultural Marxism that we see so dominant today. So we have to make sure that we're doing our part in providing leadership to homes, but also providing community. And one of the things that the research that I've already started reading is that a sense of community, both for the children and the parents, is essential in being able to see the kind of results we want to do. And it's not just enough to be a member of a church or, to listen to Focus on the Family once a week or whatever. It takes more than that.
Yes.
And so those are some of the aspects. And quite honestly, I don't know where my research is going to lead me. I don't know where God's Spirit is going to direct us. It's too early, and maybe by the end of the podcast, I want to kind of give some timeline on that so that people within Life Fellowship have reasonable expectations. But I would simply say this: doing nothing is not an option.
Absolutely, and I think that's what both of us feel. Both of us feel like this is an opportunity that God's calling us to. And I know you said this is kind of like the final chapter of your ministry, but
magnum opus.
Magnum opus, absolutely. But for me, I'm looking at this as well and saying, I want to be able to say we did everything we could to equip families, to empower families, to surround them, to support families, moms and dads, and single dads and single moms. You know what I mean? Like no matter what the family dynamic, that they know any family and that it's a part of this church, grandparents, aunts, uncles, they are going to feel like they are educated, they are resourced. And like you said, there's a community around them that they don't have to figure this out on their own. Because I think parents feel incredibly alone in a lot of their stances because the goalposts have shifted so far to the right or wherever you want to call it. We can't assume that the most basic things. We were joking last night. My daughter, we had a family birthday party. My daughter just turned 18, and I can't believe my youngest is now an adult child. But we always love telling stories of when our kids were younger. And Hallie used to say this thing. She'd go up to my wife Liz when she was a little girl. She'd be like, "Mommy, we are girls and we are not boys, right?" She would just say that, because dad and her two older brothers. She's like, "We are girls and we are not boys, right?" And Mom Liz would be like, "Yes, we're girls and we're not boys." And we would laugh about that. But what's scary to me is, like, can you imagine Hallie today saying that to the wrong mom? Mm-hmm. How ground shaking that could have been to that little girl. Well, if you want to be a boy, you could be. Like, that is, first of all, that's a lie. That's a lie. Mm-hmm. That's a lie from the pit of hell. And to me, that we can't assume anything anymore.
Right.
And so the amount of energy it's going to take for us to be vigilant and to be purposeful, you can't lean on anything culturally to make sure that the biblical framework and worldview that you hope your kids will have will be there.
Yeah. And that's one of the early conclusions I'm drawing, is this. The culture has shifted so much within families and in the broader culture. The solution is not exclusively within the family, but we have to expand our definition and at the same time narrow our definition of the culture, which is why, we were saying, well, what are we going to call your new title or whatever? And a lot of times it was, well, we should be the family discipleship pastor. And I've rejected that. I want it to be called the next generation pastor, because by saying family, it implies, well, it's for moms and dads and boys and girls. And it's beyond that. I think if we're going to make a difference in the culture by seeing the next generation come to Christ and then live out their faith all the days of their life, it is going to have to move beyond simply the family.
Yeah.
And, I'm not a big proponent of the it takes a village issue, but the spiritual family is the broader church. And I don't want people to think, well, because I've never had children, or because my children are adults, or because I'm a widow or separated or single or whatever, that I have no role in this.
That's
in
right.
fact, I think you have a great opportunity
That's right.
to make a difference.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be one of the, I believe, the changes in perspective that comes with a new strategy for this.
Absolutely. So with the remaining minutes we have, first of all, I think everyone needs to understand this didn't happen like March 1st. This is something that because we're waiting to shift you into this new role, we've got to backfill. We've got to hire an executive pastor. I explained this during our family meeting night. We're going to hire an executive pastor to take off some of my responsibilities, your responsibilities, so that you are free now to do this new effort. But once that does happen, walk us through what's the process look like in your mind of how you're gonna lean into getting ready.
Yeah. So basically, I'm doing some general reading and so forth. I just don't have the bandwidth right now to do what needs to be done to add that to my plate.
Absolutely.
And for some time, I've really, literally for 5+ years, I've tried to move out of the executive pastor's position. And because of a variety of circumstances, I haven't been able to move fully out of it. I've moved somewhat out of it, but still the primary administrative responsibilities end up on my desk. And they are such that literally every day, whatever plan I have for the day is likely not going to happen because calamities and emergencies and personnel issues and so forth. So once that gets moved off my desk, all of the budgeting, calendaring, finance procedures, human resources, risk management, all that stuff, then I was supposed to take a sabbatical 6 years ago. 6 years ago. Yeah. Well, 6 years was my last one.
Right.
I was supposed to take it 3 years ago, and I haven't been able to take it because of COVID and staffing and so forth. I need the sabbatical. And the reason I need the sabbatical is because those are designed for us to be able to give our attention to a specific elder-approved spiritual target. So when I did mine 6 years ago, it was for missions, and our missions ministry has never been the same.
That's right.
It's been wonderful. So I need 5 or 6 weeks where I can just read, study, plan, dream, pray, all those things, and come back with a plan to present to the elders. So that will be the first step. But then the implementation will have to be gradual because it involves basically 4 areas. It involves children's ministry, student ministry, which would be tweens through high school. And then it involves young single adults, which would be, your college age when a lot of the kids do the dropout thing. And then it would involve nearly married, newly married, and young children parents. So that, the first 5 to 10 years of a young couple's life together.
It's so important.
So there's really 4 facets and 4 phases of family that I'm going to be focusing on. And each of those are going to need both a separate agenda, but an integrated agenda.
That's right. Yeah.
Because they build on each other foundationally. So that will take some time. And then we use the small, medium, and large concept of, of approaching something. So what does it look like on an individual basis? What does it look like on a small group basis? And what does it look like on a community basis? So we have to do those strategic plans. So again, in my head, I see I see these Venn diagrams and all these, different things and trip, the rule of threes and how all those parts get put into place, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's important to know that if you're a member of Life Fellowship, don't expect something to be happening this May.
Right.
And at the same time, I am now in connection with other churches who, in a couple of cases, the lead pastor has resigned to take this on. And so the goal, the aspiration would be that we network with others so that we'll make our own mistakes in this and have our own successes in this, but let's build on other people's successes and avoid other people's mistakes at the same time.
That's great. Well, I can't tell you how excited I am that you're doing this, Dan, because I think there's no one else that I would prefer. When we decided for this role, I think it was Craig Barrett, who's our elder chairman, who I think it was maybe a week or two after we had decided for this role, he goes, "I got the perfect guy," and he's like, Dan Burrell. And I'm like, I can't believe I didn't think about that. But the more I thought about it, the more we prayed about that. Once we had brought that in to you, I think we prayed about this as an elder team for probably 3 or 4 months, yes, right? So it was not something that we decided quickly or. Yeah. But it was definitely something that I think that God revealed to you and revealed to us, and I just am thrilled that you're about to do it.
It's very humbling, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I'm excited about what God is doing in my own life. I want to add to this. This is not part of my retirement plan. It's not an exit strategy. I'm still going to be teaching
yes,
every
absolutely.
3rd week or so.
Yep.
I'm still going to lead missions.
Yep.
And I'm still going to be working alongside of you as closely
absolutely.
as you'll have me.
Yep.
Because after this is my 13th year in this ministry, and I care about every generation.
That's right.
in there. So to some extent, that part I hope doesn't change.
Yeah.
But it is just a focus away from process and toward people, specifically families.
Absolutely. Well, if you have any questions about what this role is going to be, again, we're in the baby stages. It's not yet fully, the vision's not yet fully developed, but the desire to what we want to see happen is definitely there. So if you have any questions, come see me or Dan. We'd love to talk with you about it. But I hope that you will do this. We're asking you to pray right now that God would bring, first of all, the right leadership to the executive pastor that we're going to be hiring, but that God would begin giving Dan and the other leaders in our church the wisdom, the vision, and the understanding that we need to make sure that we're going to do this right. And so we feel humbled by this great opportunity, and we just can't wait to serve you as the church in this new and exciting way of ministry. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode on Life Talks. We'll talk to you next time.